we're talking today about the concept of discipline. And so we can look to the example of Miyamoto Musashi. Miyamoto was a samurai in Japan. He came to be known as the greatest swordsman in Japan's history. He defeated 60 other swordsmen, one by one, and he never lost a battle. But how did Miyamoto become the example in self-discipline that he was? And he even went on to write about self-discipline and his principles. But he was the type of person who would not pursue comfort. He would not pursue pleasures in life, but instead he would travel from place to place, learning new things from different situations and teachers. You might find him in the wilderness with just him and his swords. He wasn't searching what feels good and living in the fields. He was driven by purpose. And so he would pick one discipline, such as swordsmanship, and he would commit himself to that discipline until he mastered it. And then he would move on to poetry or something else. And so really to become great, we need discipline. But for some who have a difficult history with their mental health or who are trauma survivors, they may loathe the concept of being disciplined or being a high achiever because they're known already as a high achiever. In fact, about 20% of the survivors I work with are doctors or clinicians in their own right. And definitely to attain to that status, they had to work very hard, and they achieved in the eyes of many. But in their own eyes, they do not feel successful. Why is that? Well, many of them would tell you, yes, I am a doctor, or I have achieved this amount of credentials, but I was just doing it because I was trying to survive. I was scared. So therefore it was fear-driven, or I was trying to please someone else. I was doing what I thought I needed to do to please my parents or society. So you can understand how just having achieved a lot doesn't make a person feel disciplined if their basis for achieving it was that they were just afraid, they felt controlled. Then it's not self-control or self-discipline. It's feeling like you're being controlled by something else. Not being self-guided can have terrible effects on our mental health. It can take a toll on our emotional well-being, and it can even start to manifest itself in physical illness when we are not true to ourselves, when we are compromising ourselves too much. Many high achievers suppressed their authenticity in order to achieve what they could. Many lost connection with themselves as a result, acting out of fear of pleasing others. They weren't living according to their own values. On the other hand, you have those who may say, I've always lacked self-discipline. I'm a lazy person. Or those who pursue pleasures in life and say, well, I'm always going from dopamine rush to dopamine rush. I'm an addict. And so they might even say, I have an addictive personality. And they're referring to their tendency to give in to what feels good when it feels good, which can take them down a path of too much excess: alcohol, drugs, shopping, sex, and all of the various vices. Things that people, gambling, things that people can become addicted to because it feels good for a moment. But now they depend on that in order to feel good at all. So addiction can rear its ugly head when we don't have good self-discipline. So how do we master this self-discipline? And is it a bad thing? Will it lead us just to feel like the high achievers? who look back and say, I have no delight in what I've achieved because my motive was just out of fear. If you were to look up discipline in the dictionary, you would find this definition: to train someone to obey rules or a code of behavior, or to correct disobedience. Listen to this again. Discipline is to train, that is to teach, to obey rules or a code of behavior. This is important because many people equate discipline with punishment. Discipline is not punishment. Even when we talk about disciplining your children, we need to discipline children, but disciplining children does not mean to punish children. Disciplining children means to teach children. And so a skilled parent will utilize their ability to teach a child instead of just motivating a child using fear and control. Does that make sense to you? Abusive, toxic, or immature parents will use force and fear to motivate. They will yell, they'll scream, they'll hit, they'll punish. And what does this teach the children? Well, it teaches them how to be good at avoiding punishment. So some children become liars. That was the way I went. To avoid the punishment, I just lied because I wasn't going to do the homework. Some children become people pleasers, right? Or the high achievers, just doing everything to make everyone else happy. They're managing other people's feelings. Some will develop anxiety. The results won't be good from trying to motivate your children purely out of fear of punishment. So how does a wise parent discipline children? A wise parent will teach the children patiently how to think. So for instance, let's say the lesson is that we need to clean up our mess that we make around the house. A emotionally immature parent will yell and scream when they come home and they see the mess is not cleaned up, teaching the children that in order to stop mom and dad from yelling and screaming, maybe we should clean up our mess. The problem is they're now fear-driven. So they have not learned to think. So they don't apply that same lesson to other areas of their life, which means the parents now have to react by yelling at other things that need to be done as well, because the children have not learned to think, they've learned to fear, to scramble and please out of fear. But notice a wise parent will see the mess when they come home. They will use their tools to regulate the emotions. They will invite the child into a conversation. Come have a seat with me. When I came home today, I couldn't help but to feel disappointed. The reason is because we've had a talk before about cleaning up your mess, and now I come home and it looks as if you have not cleaned up your mess. The child goes, oh, I'm sorry. And they say, well, hold on a second. I want to talk to you about this. Why is it that you didn't clean up your mess? The parent listens. Then the parent instructs. Here's the problem. If everyone in the house doesn't clean up their mess, these are the actual real life results. Here's how it makes me feel. I feel hurt. I feel embarrassed. I feel disrespected. Do you want to make your mother or father feel that way? As they talk to the child, they're awakening inside the child's brain the learning capacities. When they're speaking calmly to the child is able to learn and to take in the information. As a result of this discipline, the child can learn in a short amount of time, when there's consistency, how to think in these scenarios. So that one day they are playing with their toys and they're about to get up and run to go do something else. And they think, wait a second, if we don't clean up our messes, these are the real world outcomes. And how will my mom feel? And how will my father feel? So now they learn to consider the feelings of others, but not to manage the supposed feelings of others out of fear. Now they're learning to act in wisdom and personal power. How did the parent do this? How does the parent know how to discipline a child properly? This is important for understanding self-discipline. A parent is appealing to the ethics, the personal power, the intelligence of the child, and the compassion of the child. Notice in my example, the parent didn't appeal to fear to motivate the child. This is not how we teach our children to live. Many of us know the results of living motivated by fear. Instead, this wise parent is appealing to the ethics, intelligence, personal power, and compassion. You can use the acronym EPIC, EPIC. The ethics are the morals. So he's teaching the child right from wrong. That is discipline, helping a child to see what's good, bad, right, wrong, on a moral level, right? Giving the child spiritual instruction. Appealing to personal power is helping the child to understand what they have the power to do and how their actions affect others. It's teaching them responsibility. Appealing to the intelligence of the child is giving them reasons why, so that they can truly understand things on a deeper level. This helps a child to apply their wisdom to multiple areas of life, making parenting get easier over time instead of harder. And appealing to compassion is helping the child to care about the feelings of others and how their actions affect other people's feelings, so that they're motivated and guided by love. Because that's what we should all be motivated by, not by fear. We should be motivated and guided by love. So how can we apply this to self-discipline? Well, you have an inner child to parent, and that parenting job doesn't end after 18 years. In fact, it's just beginning at 18 years old. You see, when we become adults, we are now responsible for parenting ourselves. Many people who are adults make the mistake of thinking that their parents still have the job of parenting them. And they have resentment for their parents, and they get into arguments and fights with their parents. But none of that is necessary, because the parent's job stops when the adult becomes an adult and capable of guiding themselves. So now the adult must guide themselves. So as an adult, how do we parent ourselves? Well, we have to give ourselves encouragement. We have to give ourselves love. We have to give ourselves attention, right? And so when it comes to discipline, which is to teach, we go back to that original definition. It is to train to obey the rules or code of behavior. So whatever you want to do and however you want to be, to develop self-discipline, you must train yourself to obey the code. What code? Well, the code that you create. The code that you create. That's self-discipline. We won't run into the problem of looking back and resenting the way we've used our lives if we're not living according to someone else's code. But if we live according to our own code, then whatever you achieve in your life will line up with your values, and you will feel a sense of alignment and self-fulfillment. Of course, the values themselves need to be instructed. How do we instruct our own values? Ethics, intelligence. You have to analyze your personal values and over time update them to make sure that they are wise, that is intelligent, and that they are moral, that is ethical. But when you have good values that really line up with who you want to be, Now you can live each day living up to those values. That is to have self-discipline, which is to train oneself to live up to, okay, but wait, how do you train yourself? Well, how do you train anyone? How do you train anything? All dog trainers tell you that the key to training a dog is patience and consistency. We need to be consistent with the dog. That is to use repetition, right? And isn't that how you train your dog? You tell it to sit. You don't tell it one time or two times or even just 10. You say sit, and then you push his little butt down. And then when he does it, you reward him. And then you do it again. Sit, and then you push him down. When he does it right, you reward him. Sit, and you push him down. When he does it right, you reward him. And you're just patiently, right? Screaming's not going to help. Yelling, creating a tense environment's not going to help. All the hitting and stuff, that just teaches fear, right? It's the consistency that actually trains the animal. So how should we do it with ourselves? Well, we need to stop beating ourselves up because that's not helping, right? We need to stop using harsh words with ourselves. That's not helping. If you want to train the self, then you need to use patience and consistency. Repetition. So how do we develop self-discipline? Remember, discipline is to train oneself to obey a code of conduct or obey rules. So if you want to become someone who responds with kindness or patience or who speaks at a lower tone, if you want to become someone who's not guided by the feelings, then we need to train ourselves to be that way by being consistent. If you want to be someone who gets up and goes to the gym, or who focuses on doing their at-home work on a regular basis, whatever it is you want to do, to not eat so much sugar, to stop smoking. If you want to develop self-discipline, then you have to be consistent, which means don't waver, don't back down, and don't stop doing what you should be doing. Don't stop in the training process. Don't slack off in the training process. Be consistent. Is it that simple? Yes. Self-discipline is very simple in practice. It's just not easy. Well, why isn't it easy? Because we got these emotions. The emotions are the chemical, electrical impulses we got going on in the body, coupled with the thoughts. It makes us start to feel out of control. We feel dysregulated. So then we start to say things like, when I'm dysregulated, I can't stop and think. It's not possible for me to control myself. So how can we develop self-control if sometimes our emotions are dysregulated? Well, it's good to use the process STOP, acronym STOP. Being still, being thoughtful, being observant, and being patient is a skill set that needs practice. So if you feel dysregulated and you say, I can't control myself when I become dysregulated, that's like saying to me, I can't run a mile. Does it mean that you really, literally cannot possibly run a mile? When someone says that generally, it's that they haven't trained to run the mile. It's difficult to run a mile, but to learn to do it is simple. How would you train someone to run a mile? Well, you would simply take them out, take them running, and increase in increments the amount that they run each time until they are able to stay running for an entire mile. It is so simple. And that is the same way we learn to control the self, to have self-control despite our impulses. It is not an excuse to say, well, I feel dysregulated, so I can't control myself. Because if a man feels dysregulated and decides he's going to batter his wife, you wouldn't take his feelings as an excuse. for not controlling his actions. We expect criminals to learn to control their actions despite the impulses they may feel to rob, to cheat, to steal, to harm, to accost, to molest, to rape. Despite the impulses, they are responsible for their actions, right? So the actions have to be separated from the impulses. Some people don't realize that there is a difference between the actions and the impulses. Like Jane, who was a chain smoker, and when she went to a researcher to get some help to break this chain smoking, the researcher said, well, I want you to track your impulses, your cravings. And she said, cravings? I don't have cravings. But Jane is a chain smoker. Of course she's having cravings, but she's not aware that she has cravings, because what does she do when she has a craving? She just smokes. Very simple. She thinks there is no separation between the thoughts, the cravings, the feelings, and the actual actions. So a researcher just had to say, try to track your cravings. She goes, okay. And lo and behold, when she got home and she started tracking her cravings, she became aware of these overwhelming cravings that she's always having. She comes back and she says, you're right, I got these cravings. There's all these cravings. But the problem now is that I'm always thinking about smoking. So what do I do? Well, the researcher said, try allowing yourself to have the craving without necessarily taking any action. Well, that sounds awful, Jane said. But she took his advice and she tried it, and eventually she was able to quit smoking. Well, how? She had to learn to observe the feeling, to feel the craving, the urge, the impulse, and let it wash through. And what you discover when you do this practice, which it's called by many mindfulness, is you will discover that you are immensely powerful. You are more powerful than your emotions. Take that home with you. You are more powerful than your cravings. You are more powerful than the impulse to do one particular action at a given moment and a time. It is just a feeling. And although it's strong and it moves you and it could bring tears to your eyes, it could make your whole body shake, it could make your heart start pumping. Regardless, it is because you have adrenaline dropped into your system, or cortisol being dropped into your system at large amounts. It is chemicals. You have the ability to remain still. It takes practice. So if you find yourself struggling with self-control, start there with the acronym STOP. Start on that first letter. S stands for stillness. Be still. Practice. Allow yourself to have feelings, urges, emotions, and just be still. Don't take action. If you want chocolate chip cookies, if you want ice cream, just allow yourself to feel the craving without moving toward it. Just as a practice. Because what you're doing is you're teaching yourself, your subconscious mind, that you have the ability to overcome, to surpass, to transcend the feeling. You separate the impulse from the action, and you are developing the muscle of self-control. To discipline is to teach, to train oneself or someone else to follow rules and principles. How would you discipline someone to run a mile? How would you train them to run a mile? Through repetition. They would do it again and again, each time in greater intervals. You would commend them after each time. You'd say, good job. Meet me out here again tomorrow. You do the same thing with learning to control the impulses, in that you separate, you feel the emotion, but you don't take the action. And you extend the intervals and extend the intervals. And eventually, you will be a person who is known for your self-control. Be still, be thoughtful. That is to observe what you're feeling, to manage the thoughts so that we're thinking more in the positive. I can do this. I've got this. I'm in control. Be observant. I notice I am feeling. Here's where I am at in this stream of time. Here's what's around me in my physical environment. And be patient, because we're going to make mistakes. So we need to be patient with ourselves. Don't self-punish. That's not really a necessary part of self-discipline. We don't need to self-punish, because our system already is designed to give us a drop of cortisol when we violate our own values. That's what you call guilt. When you feel bad because you've done something that you felt was wrong, we already have that system in place. So you don't have to punish yourself. So be patient. When you make a mistake, you will naturally feel guilty for not living up to your own ideals. Your job is simply to say, like you would say to a friend that you're training, or like you would say to a child or a dog that you're training, that's okay. Let's try it again. Because we have to be consistent, which involves the concept of being persistent at working toward our goals. Is this making sense? Again, if you have the impulse to do something that you wisely, in your wise mind, know that you shouldn't do, allow yourself to let that feeling wash through without taking the action. Build that skill. Be consistent. Use repetition. Now, what if you're trying to have discipline more so than the self-control? So you really want to learn to be that person who works out and goes to the gym. You really want to be that person who achieves and does things that they desire to do. How can we become more self-disciplined? Well, we need to be consistent and use repetition. It's important to understand that a person who is self-disciplined or self-control, what they have is the ability to not be led by the emotions and the impulses. They're not led by fear. They're not led by feelings and sentiment. They're not led by the urges. What are they led by? Well, they self-control in other languages is autodominio, which means to dominate the self. So they are led by themselves. Specifically, the consciousness or the conscious mind, which is you, is the rightful leader of the autonomous self, not the emotions. You're not supposed to follow the emotions. The emotions are merely an assistant to inform you that something is aligning or violating your values. That's what emotions are. And that's the value of emotions. Keep them in their proper place. Be the boss. Step up. Be the CEO of the self. So if you want to be self-disciplined, then step up as a CEO and create repetition and consistency. But I don't feel motivated. That's my problem, Roman. I would be a disciplined person, but I just don't feel any motivation. I know what I should do. I wake up in the morning and it's like I hear my 6 o'clock alarm go off and I know I should go to the gym, but I don't feel motivated to go to the gym. Trust the process. Motivation, the secret to motivation is that motivation comes from momentum. We are creatures of inertia, momentum. If you want to feel motivated, you will feel motivated through momentum. Momentum is built by moving forward. Forward motion creates motivation. Let me explain what I mean here. if you want to go to the gym and you want to feel motivated to go to the gym so you can be a self-disciplined person, what you're doing is you're saying, well, I don't have the feels and I want to feel it. And not having the feels means I can't do it. That's what a complaint of not having motivation is. It's saying, I'm not feeling it, so I can't do it. We all want to feel it while we're doing it. But in order to build motivation, you have to get momentum. So you're going to need to at first do it without feeling it. Does that make sense? That means get up tomorrow morning when your 6 o'clock alarm goes off and go to the gym. Are you going to feel like it? No. It will be one of the hardest things you've ever tried to do. It will feel awful for the first 15 minutes of getting up and getting dressed and putting on stuff. But in a very short amount of time, something will happen. You will have created enough inertia that morning that it will actually start to get easier to get to the gym. I don't know if it's going to be after you brush your teeth or after you put your gym shoes on. I don't know if it's going to be after you pack your duffel bag, but there will be a certain point. Maybe it's while you're on your way, but there will be enough inertia that's actually going to get you to the gym and you will start to feel it. But here's the best part. As you work your way through your arduous workout, and then you get up tomorrow morning and you do it again, and then you get up the next morning and you do it again, and then you get up and you do it again because you're applying intellectually repetition because you're led by the consciousness, the wise self, it will start to become easier. And next thing you know, you've got 2 weeks of working out at the gym, and one day you're in the mirror and you say, oh, wow, I like some of the results that I see. And because you like the results, guess how you're going to feel? You're going to get that shot of dopamine, a little oxytocin, serotonin. You're going to say, I think I want to go to the gym tomorrow morning. In fact, I want to go tonight because I'm loving what I'm seeing. And what's happening? You're getting motivation. But where did the motivation come from? It came from momentum. Motivation comes from momentum. So get to work. Get started. Be self-disciplined. That means you step up as a CEO. You decide, I'm going to do this, and then do it. But what if you fail? Failure is the only pathway to success. Every successful person has failed in order to get to where they are. One woman who was a successful singer, she was making $50,000 a week singing at her shows in Vegas or wherever it was. And she said, people see all this glamour, but they don't see the 16 years on the road, singing in dive bars, people throwing up on the piano. They don't see all that, the failure. Being a failure for 16 years is how I got here. So I encourage you, go ahead, go seek the failure. It's a part of the process. It's a part of the road to success. Set goals, have a purpose, determine what your purpose is. Purpose is just an objective. Write it down on a piece of paper. Allow your desires to exist without following them. Allow your desires to exist without following them. That's self-control. Move forward without the desires or the urges. Move forward without the desires and the urges. That's self-discipline. Avoid distraction. Don't seek comfort. Don't seek pleasure. Be motivated by love and purpose. That is your dream, your vision of the future, what you hope to accomplish in the next year. Let that motivate you. Do you feel like you've got it? Do you know what you need to do to be self-disciplined? Here's 2 steps for your notes. Step 1, decide. Decide what you shall do. Decide that you will be a disciplined person. That is the first step, because it's all about you being the leader of the self, stepping up as that CEO, as that loving boss, and saying, all right, it's time for me to do this. And this is what we're going to do. Step up. You make the decision that you are going to be self-disciplined. And step number 2, practice. Practice separating the urges from the actions and the actions from the urges. You need to be able to act without having the urge. And you need to be able to have an urge without acting. Once you've got that separated, you have it. Because when you have an urge without acting, then you have self-control. And when you can act without having an urge, then you have self-discipline.